I'd like to welcome Stephanie Posovich. Stephanie's investigated how stakeholders in Imperial College's Airways health monitoring study perceive the people behind the numbers. In the study, participants consent to the use and storage of their biological samples and data. With interview material from Airwaves staff and participants, Steph created data murmurations, points in flight, which you may also have had a chance to scan next door. Here, Steph maps the journey that a participant's biosamples and data take through the study, and she's drawn different views according to the positions of stakeholders in the Airwaves system. I'm very happy to announce that Steph is launching the work today, and you'll be able to visit it again on our website shortly. Thank you, Steph.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here for my first talk in real life for about a year and a half. So I'm Stephanie Posovich, obviously. I'm a London-based information designer, artist, and author, and I mainly work on creating experimental data design projects like what you see on screen. So a lot of the projects of mine, they look a little different than traditional data visualizations or charts, where instead I might be creating projects from data that are danceable, hoppable, or wearable, ideally in a way that's playful and accessible to a wide audience. And another important thing about me is that when working with data, I don't really code much, but I tend to focus on representing data using a very lo-fi, handmade, and laborious approach. So I really like to make things hard for myself when it comes to visualizing data. And Sophie touched upon this, but I'll also talk about it, that I joined People Like You just before the pandemic really began. So I've seen a lot. This is the first time I've seen a lot of them in real life. And I've been working with Helen and Roz of People Like You, undertaking an art as inquiry residency within their focus on personalized medicine. And so this is what you see on screen is what I embarked upon my residency wanting to research. So how these various stakeholders in the biobank perceive the people behind the numbers who are consenting to their samples and data being used and stored for research. So in case you don't know what a biobank is, this is my rough definition, where it's a system that acquires, processes, stores, and then allows access to data and biosamples in ways that enables researchers to use this to answer research questions. And so also within my questions that I started out with before creating this work, I wanted to answer the following questions on screen. What is a biobank truly made of? People, data, or tissue? How is the original donating person figured at every step of this process? And then at every stage within the system, are the core stakeholders always able to see the people in the data or the data within the people? So, as mentioned, my project focus was the Airwave Health Monitoring Study, a cohort study and biobank led by Imperial that's been following the lives of about 53,000 members of the police force since 2004. It was originally created to determine if police radios have detrimental health effects, and they haven't found any so far, but now the data and biobank are used to study many different health outcomes. Oh, there's that last one there. And so through this process, I began to interview members of the Airwave team and then read papers and pore over their website. And I started by creating this very rough diagram, so drawing out of how the system worked and then listing all the various data points that the study would theoretically collect on a participant. So at this point, I needed to find a way to create an artwork from my findings. Normally, I start by finding a data set to work with, but there were problems with this because I can't access actual Airwave data because I don't have a valid research reason. Also, data protection and all of that, right? And also, I was finding it challenging to find a way of mapping the Airwave system in any precise way because things have changed over the years. So some data was collected, and then they might stop collecting that type of data. Some participants have had genetic mapping or metabolic analysis, and some haven't. And then there might be a lot of data attached to one participant, but not to another. So there's no one perfect way of representing the system for everyone anyhow. So this is where I had to come up with a new way of working. I had to accept that this is a data project that can't be precise. It can't be completist and map everything ever all at once in the way that many data visualization projects like what you see on screen try to do. But I had to accept a certain amount of uncertainty and have an element of flexibility within the process. So at this point, I was just taking tons of notes and doing these kind of these drawings, mapping everything out, but then I stopped that and I began to create small sketches of various processes within the system, like what you see on screen, in order to better understand how everything fit together, and these also sort of helped me figure out what to make at the end of this. And so I began to think of this well-known work by Marcel Duchamp, The Bride Stripped Bare, by her bachelor's even. And this is actually a reproduction that's in the Tate, reconstructed by Richard Hamilton, but it's the one that I first saw in person, so it's the one that I like to reference. With this, I was really interested in how Duchamp is creating this artistic diagram of a process, even though a process wasn't necessarily something that was even real life. But ultimately, every single part of this work has a meaning and could be labeled, and everything's there for a reason, similar to more traditional data visualization like what I work with. So I became interested in this idea of creating artistic diagrams of a process and abstract concepts, using whatever data and information that I did have, so trying to be very faithful to that, but then also accepting that the end result might not be completely, there's no way to be perfectly accurate, but might need to sit in an in-between space where imperfection is okay. So this is what I decided to create, where I decided to create a large airwaves system map showing the process of data collection to analysis within the study. And then I created these 8 images of varying, they're all the same size now, 8 images to represent the views upon the system of various stakeholders within the process. And so on screen, you can see it all out there, but lines never show up well on projector, but this is the whole set, and this is them in scale to each other, so all the views are of the stakeholders are all A2, and the system map is larger. So just to walk through this work, although it is out there if you want to look closer. So we'll start with this final system map, where it starts at the bottom with data acquisition, where Airwaves staff coordinate and they set up screening clinics and then invite people to take part, receive a free health screening, and then while they're there, lots of data and samples are collected from them to be used as part of the study. And this image looks really abstract, but there is a visual language here where the study clinic introduces many of the parts of this language that I use to communicate about the process, and then also to create a unity across the whole set of work. So starting with representing participants as point clouds, we are all a cloud of data points that are just waiting latent within us, waiting to be activated through collection. And then when this data is collected from participants, they begin to move, and data points that travel draw. So kind of referencing Paul Clay's quote, which is written online in many ways, like a line is a dot that went for a walk, so a line is a data point that went for a walk. So traveling through the airwave study system, where physical spaces in the work is always represented with isometric cubes. And then in these cubes, there's often a window, and this represents the consent that's required from the participant in order to collect data and more from them. So no consent, there's no window that the data can travel through, so it can't be collected. So here you can see the study clinic where the data is being pulled from the participant and then goes to the window of consent. into the system, where then it's sent to various data and sample processing centers so they can be analyzed further and prepared for storage, although some of this might happen at a later date. Where again, I've got this visual language where the 2D squares represent more virtual spaces like databases or online survey platforms and so on. And then once it's all prepared for storage, that's where it goes to their final storage locations. So data is in the Imperial College's secure enclave, and then biosamples in long-term storage in Milton Keynes. But with this, not all data for a participant is neatly organized. So there might be some data that is not in a format that can be accessible by researchers, where it's disorganized, or I'm calling it disorganized data, where I drew it like this, and this adds to this visual language across the work. And it came from the term blob of binary as described by the data administrator, or when describing this unstructured data. And then lastly in the system is analysis, where there's the Dementius UK data portal, an external site where researchers can apply to access this data. And here in this analysis, this is the researchers will gather together these disparate data points for the duration of their research, then once finished, release and disperse these data points back to their location, sort of, collecting and dispersing, and sort of represented through these lines that create patterns that bring to mind murmurations of starlings in the sky, so which is where the title of this work, Data Murmurations, came from. And so these arcs and language are found through the series. So then finally, that's the process, but at a future date, participants might be invited to take part in another study or invited back for a rescreen to add to the study within a future study clinic. And so this data may be used in tandem with the airwave study data for analysis. So that's all been drawn by hands on an iPad and then pieced together in a very complex Photoshop file on my kitchen table during the pandemic. So it's very big. But now onto the various stakeholder views within this system, where I've they have their positions within this map as marked above. So I'll just quickly go through them now, though they're outside. Just starting with the principal investigator, who oversees every aspect of the study. And for them, a cohort grows over time and needs certain conditions to thrive, like participants' trust in the study, value that the study gives to them, like the free health screening, and then continual funding. So I took this kind of growing metaphor to create this work, where this cohort point cloud grows over time from a pile of trust, value, and funding down below, where all of the cohort has to go through another window of consent to reach the full cohort. And here, there's another part of my visual language where there are these cohort dots that are various shades of blue, like the traditional dark blue of police uniforms. Next, quickly onto the nurse within the study clinic, who, their goal is to ensure they collect all the data and samples in line with the study's requirements, while also keeping participants comfortable by building rapport and being personable and friendly. So my work represents this rapport in the work for the nurse, where there's this back and forth between conversation that collects blue data points back and forth as part of the process. And in here, there's another part of my visual language where these multicolored data points bouncing away from the work represent data points that about the participant that have been revealed through conversation but aren't collected by the study, and so they're lost. And so it's sort of alluding to, points bouncing away like the particle trails in quantum physics experiments. Then I've got the participant's view. One participant likened their data in the study to being a drop in the ocean. That's the airwave cohort. So I made this work in response to that, as though you can see their viewpoint, as though they're sitting in the space of the clinic, where they can see them down at themselves. They can see these multicolored trails of data being collected by the study, going through the window of consent and dropping into the cohort ocean. And then far away, researchers are analyzing cohort data on the horizon. I've got a lot of these drawings, but I'll speed up. But then I also interviewed the clinic logistic manager who visits clinic sites, trains nurses according to the study protocol, and ensures that the data and samples are collected consistently. And so for them, the participants are referred to the cohort, even though when within the clinic, they do build rapport with individual participants. But they're always working towards one goal, to achieve a certain number of participants in the cohort or a specific percentage of rescreens. So I try to represent this through having this clinic down at the bottom, where this aggregated data of a participant is moving up to this bowl of a blue cohort, slowly trying. I know I've got it on my on my projector as well. On my screen as well, but trying to reach a goal line up at the top for the optimum amount of participants being screened. So next, onto the study logistics manager, who oversees the operation of the whole screening and data collection process, where for them, participants are not a resource, but vibrant, multifaceted people. And treating the participants with empathy is important. So that's why in this image, instead of having a gray point cloud representing participants, there's this multicolored to show their perception of the participants as more than a resource, more than numbers, where this represents one vibrant participant from many being invited into a clinic for a rescreen. Where again, you can see another part of my visual language where there are these grids that represent organized people, resources, and data. And then I've also looked at lab technicians, where the lab technician sets the individual aside to just focus on preserving and preparing the samples perfectly, where I try to represent that focused vision by creating this tunneling space that obscures everything but the samples. So you can see the dotted line of the journey this sample has taken from the clinic behind, but again, it's meant to represent it's obscured by this focus gaze. Then we have the database administrator, the data gatekeeper, who is the connection between the data and the participants. They are the only ones that hold the key to connect a person's name to the data, so represented by this kind of intersection. And then finally, the researcher at the end of this process, who will apply to access specific parts of the data set, and then they access the data using the Dementius portal. And so for some researchers, during the data analysis, the data is data, and it's okay that the individual participant isn't necessarily easily seen within the data set. But an individual's data might only be singled out if they're an outlier, and then their data will be checked closely to see if they're in error and potentially cleaned to then ready the data for statistical analysis. So I represented this view by this representing the cohort. There's one pink individual who's been chopped off and cleaned and set aside to clean the cohort data set. So that's a run through the entire work. It's all out there. Did I answer my questions? Let's see. I would say that people become distilled into data the further along in the system they are. Near the beginning, there are more people, and then they become less so. And through this process of distillation into data, the person becomes different things to different people, so vibrant individuals, to blobs of binary, to samples, to rows and columns in the data portal. And finally, are they always able to see the people? No, but they always have very particular views based on their location within the system. And this is an early map, with early sketches where I began to map out like who sees what. and they all see different things. And just to wrap up my takeaway of this work by reading, kind of touching upon a quote by the writer Jenny Odell, where she says for herself, "I refuse to be one thing. I don't want the convenience of being collapsed, defined, optimized for legibility. I want to be aerated, blobby, and porous. I want to be a distributed self, an assembly that assembles with others, that refuses or exceeds hyper-rational, neo-colonial frameworks, hierarchies, and ways of seeing." And so I think with this, I really like this quote, and I'm struck by the similarities from a perspective of this idea of messiness and blobbiness between the biobank data and the people that Jenny is describing. And I think that even the data that's found in the airwave study, through my experience, is naturally exceeding and overflowing, and it takes time to format and structure. And I think this really surprised me, because I was expecting to create a data work that was precise and comprehensive and completist, but instead found the airwave system is in some ways as blobby and distributed as the participants within it. And that's it. But we've done a soft launch of the work online. If you go to that website, so just let me know. Any feedback would be gratefully received. Thank you.